for joining us, and thank you for your patience. I know we had to reschedule this webinar, so you might have originally signed up for a date in December, and here we are in January, but still super timely. I'm excited to hear Ron and Rick kind of talk through our vision from a Rockerbox perspective on aligning marketing strategy with unified measurement for 2025. So as people are kind of trickling in, before we dive into the questions themselves, a couple of pieces of housekeeping. There is a chat on the right-hand side of your screen. When you post questions or comments in there, that is visible to the entire audience. It's a great way for us to make this a little bit more interactive. We would love your questions, so feel free to drop them in throughout the presentation. Don't feel like you have to wait until the end. Feel free to ask whenever. But before we jump in, I'm going to let Ron and Rick introduce themselves before we get into the questions. So Ron.
Awesome. Yeah, good to be here. I'm Ron Jacobson. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Rockerbox. For some reason, whenever I do these webinars, I feel like I notice my own posture and how horrible my posture is. So I'm like very much trying to become aligned. But anyway, Ron Jacobson, co-founder and CEO of Rockerbox. Super excited to be here talking with everybody and pumped to be talking with my co-founder, Rick. So Rick, want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm excited to talk through kind of the future of unified measurement and Rockerbox. This has been something that Ron and I have talked about for a long time around just bringing together a lot of disparate ways of measuring marketing. So we're really excited to bring it to market this year in 2025.
Awesome. Well, without further ado, this is going to be a panel style webinar. So we have a few questions that we're going to kind of, that I'm going to throw at Ron and Rick, and then kind of let them take the conversation where it goes. But the first question is, what shifts in the marketing landscape have made unified measurement not just valuable, but essential for companies to stay competitive in 2025? And I think where this question comes from is, this is, Rick, to your point, a conversation that's been happening kind of behind the scenes at Rockerbox for a long time. But what is it that makes it especially important for brands to be thinking about today?
I think even more broadly, this is a conversation that's been happening across the industry for a handful of years now. So I think one of the things that's really interesting about the marketing landscape, specifically on the measurement side, is that it's always under constant change. There's new channels launching. There's new opportunities to spend your money, to ultimately buy media. But then also there's changes to the ecosystem, privacy changes, technology changes, ways that you're able to track. I think unified really comes down to the idea that there's not going to be one specific analysis that you can do, or one method for measuring every piece of marketing. But at the end of the day, as an organization that's running your marketing, you need to be able to measure all types of marketing. And then you ultimately need to be able to bring all of that back together, so that you can bring it back to the rest of your organization and be able to communicate what's working and what's not working. So unified is really set with the vision of kind of reestablishing that source of truth. So for a while, folks relied on Google Analytics as the gold standard for their source of truth. That's obviously shifted over time, but what we really see with unified is being able to take the different types of measurement, testing, MMM, MTA, and bring it all together and be able to prepare and reestablish that source of truth that an organization can rely upon, that kind of tells their story about how their marketing is performing.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, a lot of it stems from we as an industry have made measurement, frankly, really difficult. And I'm not necessarily saying that there's no reason why this happened. Obviously, there's been a lot of changes from privacy to new channels to how companies sell and where they sell that have led to the necessity for different ways to measure your marketing, for different analyses to run. So there's a reason we got to where we are. But the end state is really hard for marketers. It's really hard. If I just think of I'm your everyday marketer, CMO, even CFO trying to make sense of marketing data, it's harder than ever in many ways, despite the fact that there are better tools and more tools than ever to help measure your marketing. And I think looking forward, what we really want to bring to market is how do we kind of make sense of these disparate data sources? How do we make sense of these disparate analyses in a way that tries to simplify rather than just complicate measurement? It's really hard. It's I referred to the other day as like it's that final boss challenge of measurement is how do you combine these different methodologies to try to give one guiding light direction for brands to operate on. But I think we owe it to marketers. I think we owe it to the industry to try to make it happen. Because again, although we've given a lot of tools that have in a way made marketers really powerful, they have better analysis than ever available. It's also just more numbers and more insights, more numbers and more different areas you have to go to try to actually make one conclusion than ever. So we've complicated things, rightfully so, but now it's time to try to simplify as much as we can.
Yeah, and I think we've seen this with other kind of like heavy titans of the industry. I think Google released a white paper last year just trying to make sense of this as well. And it got us thinking, like, really looking at what they're recommending. When we talked to our customers, it was complicated. Everything about it was like, hey, this is something that they're kind of telling us, hey, we need a testing roadmap 2 years in advance so that we can have better MMM runs, and that we need always on measurement with Google Analytics or an MTA solution. But I think what they were offering was for kind of like a strategic alignment around how to like work with all of these different tools, but not necessarily a way for an individual company to make sense of it and kind of pull it all together. So I think like the difference between what we were seeing there was like, hey, you should be doing all of these things. Here's how you could be doing all of these things. And our approach is really like, here's a path forward to be able to incorporate this all together, and actually in the name of simplification. So as Ron was saying, like, everything's getting more complex. There's tons of vendors that are tackling different parts of the problem: creative optimization, testing, MMM. And really for us, we're looking at the opportunity to help simplify that for marketing teams and marketing organizations and kind of bring it all under one umbrella.
I'm laughing because like I do a good amount of LinkedIn posting, and sometimes I think a lot about it, and sometimes I barely think about my post and just post. And I think my number one post of all time was when I didn't really think about it at all, and it was calling out the Google modern measurement playbook, which again I actually give them a lot of credit for what they put in market. So I think they thank you for putting that out there. But there was this one slide showing that measurement roadmap for like the next 2 years, and I was like, this just seems really hard to do operationally. Like, I don't know what companies can do this, and that just like got so much traction. So many people were raising their hand, feeling that same pain. So, yeah, it's sometimes it's just even if it's like theoretically the right thing to do, complexity is just the killer.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that kind of leads us to the next question is like all of this is very complex and there's a lot going on here. And we're not just talking about measurement, we're also talking about like all of the data that's being delivered to marketers. So how should these businesses be kind of reimagining the way that they leverage all of the data that they have access to transform their organizations? Because to both of your points, there's a lot more data than there ever has been before. And some of it is conflicting and some of it is confusing. Where should businesses be prioritizing this data?
Yeah. I think like a big place where we've started has always been with the data foundation. I think one of being able to have a place that at the end of it has all of your data in one place is really an important place to start. Basically, data can be spread across many different places. You could be in different platforms, different tools. But at the end of the day, what you're really looking for is a place where you, as an organization, have all of the inputs and all of the outputs in one location, so that when folks outside of the org or outside of your marketing org need the opportunity to look at something, you're able to go and know that that's kind of like the central place where that information is coming from. I think like as you kind of move out from that, reimagining the role of data and driving that transformation across the business. It's, what is finance depending on, what is the product team depending on, and where do they look and how do they get access to that information? Because everything's impacted by marketing and where marketing is being spent. So I think like that's been a big component of how we've thought about Unified and what it can provide back to an organization is marketing's opinion on essentially the rolled up version of all of their marketing attribution. This is what a marketing org believes, and this is what we want to be able to communicate out to others.
Yeah, I think the finance point is actually really important too, because if this is done well, you're getting all the data centralized, clean, normalized, and it's not just working for marketing, but it's working across the entire organization. And it doesn't always start there. That actually takes a good amount of time, we find, to have success in transforming it from a marketing-led initiative to a cross-company organization initiative. But when that happens, it's super powerful. It's super powerful because it really just drives alignment, and frankly, it makes both orgs' lives easier. Like if marketing has clear KPIs that finance is bought into, and finance can go back to marketing and say, based off this, it seems like you should be able to spend more into this channel. Like I'm down to give you the budget. Why not? Like that's a really great conversation to have. But it all starts with having consistent, clean data. And where we see this played out really poorly is, you know, finance is using GA last touch, marketing is using for one channel, incrementality for one channel, media mix model. Like if there's too much kind of divergence in terms of what actual data is being used to measure marketing, it kind of just makes it harder for different parts of the org to work together. So the better you can get alignment there, it's a huge unlock for your company.
Ron, I actually think that leads really well into the next question. And so I'm going to throw it at you. How can unified measurement evolve beyond aligning methodologies like MTA, MMM, and testing to become really a foundational framework for decision making?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I think with an approach that unifies across different methodologies, but also unifies across what you know of your business, and that's like a really, really important part. I think that's where you have buy-in across the org in terms of the KPIs you're showing. So like MTA, MMM testing are all hugely important. Happy to talk a lot about them. But there's also going to be times where, as a business, you just learn things. There can be silly examples. Oh crap! By mistake, we stopped sending direct mail last month. Like I've actually had these things happen to clients, but in a way that's like a bit of a holdout task. It's not the most scientific one in the world, but it's something that happened that gives your business some anecdotal data, and being able to leverage that on top of your measurement is really important, because it goes just beyond these three algorithms, these three systems that are important, but it starts to enable you to take what you really know about your business and bring it together. And I think those are kind of the constant changes. Another one is a competitor launches a product and has a huge impact on your business. Well, being able to leverage that as part of your measurement is really important as well. So it's taking what you kind of have factually, but also what you know anecdotally together, is I think where you kind of go just beyond the pure methodologies, which are obviously very important. But that sort of calibration with that extra information can really just give a lot of confidence internally to a company that the data that's being used is right and it represents the business.
Yeah, that business context has been something that we've increasingly thought a lot more about as we moved into MMM and testing and other methodologies. I think one of the things that kind of stands out to us is not everything has that ability to be measured in the way that you would ideally want, even using the latest and greatest tools. As an example, there's some businesses that have like these really peak periods of time where within 1 month or 1 quarter, they might get 90% of their revenue delivered during that period of time. And an interesting like insight that comes out of that is you're not going to run your incrementality test during that time. You're not going to hold out any media during that time. MMM is going to have a really difficult time having some way of understanding what's occurring during that time. And MTA is going to be pretty correlated with revenue during that time. So you have this problem within marketing measurement where you still have heuristics about the business. Externally, you know that, hey, 90% of my revenue is going to occur there. How do I actually bring in forecasting? How do I bring in some other method of baselining based off of where I've been right before that period back into unified? And a lot of different methodologies, MMM and testing, you start to play around with those. But really, when you get a result that might not match your peak period, you need to be able to tune that and say like, yeah, marketing is really important during that period of time. We should be spending a lot, and being able to bring that back to the business in a way that is foundational, that can be agreed upon with the marketing org and across org, so that you understand the importance of being able to spend during those peak periods of time and maximize the revenue opportunity that's going to occur. So I think like that's kind of where I think about the evolution, but beyond these is being able to bring in other types of either forecasting or time series analysis or other things that might exist outside of there, or even just the heuristics of those opportunities back into the model, so that you have a good foundational source of truth that's kind of rooted in the principles of what your business has and its impact on that KPI of revenue or whatever it is that you track against.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just a reminder, if you guys have any questions, drop them in the chat. We're happy to take those as they come. But kind of taking another, we're talking about unified measurement. We're talking about aligning your marketing strategy, but we're also talking about what that looks like in 2025. And there are a lot of like hot topics right now, including privacy and AI, and even new channels that are emerging, or the threat of channels that we're leveraging pretty heavily potentially going away. Like there's just a lot happening for marketers right now. So what principles should guide companies in building their measurement strategies that are both resilient and adaptable? And like how should we be thinking about this as marketers today? And Ron, I'll throw this one to you again.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I'm obviously biased here, but I do think as a company, it's important for you to ask the question of like, what do you want to be an expert in? And what I mean by that is, ask yourself an honest internal question, like, are we going to be the experts on building measurement technology, or are we going to be the experts on leveraging measurement technology? And both can work. I'm not trying to pretend that one can and the other can't. But particularly with all the changes that happen, what I think is it behooves a lot of companies to kind of outsource the need for somebody to keep up with all the marketing change to technologies that's all they do. Be it a Rockerbox, be it other competitors in market. I think leveraging providers who have to spend every single day, week and month keeping up with these changes, and frankly, who can afford to spend every day, week and month keeping up with these changes because they have hundreds of customers to amortize that cost across that cost against. It starts to make sense. And I know that's somewhat self-serving, but the other side of it, frankly, and this is where I think it is just truthful, is it gives your team more time to focus on the output of, I got these answers. How can I take my business context that I know that's unique to us, and how can I use the output of all this measurement to make the right business decisions? And I think like that's a much higher leverage use of time than trying to kind of rebuild the wheel. So I think that's probably, like, privacy was one that we've had to deal with numerous times over the years, from third-party cookies kind of going away to coming back to going away again to Apple changes. So like, we think about this all day long. As an individual brand, that's going to be tough to do. Yeah, that's kind of my first take on this.
I'll kind of take a slightly different direction on particularly the AI front, and it has less to do with measurement and more to do with, I think, the emerging opportunity for marketers. So I think for a long time, the optimization that you could make within marketing was, the creative optimization that you could control and produce quickly. So you had the ability to iterate on keywords, on the text, on the images that you included in your creative, that sort of thing. I think the big opportunity in 2025 for marketers is going to be on the front where you're going to have the ability to optimize in a lot of different ways that were never possible before. I think having a strategy in place that really understands what is that optimization that I'm making, what is that content that I'm producing, how do I track it, how do I know it's working, is going to be increasingly important for you as a marketing team and an org to be able to learn from that. So I think from my perspective, it's actually on the creative side where I think that there's going to be a gigantic change in the way that marketers can operate. If your org chooses to kind of adopt that and start, producing video content or things for your brand that might be more engaging or different than what you were able to do in 2023 or 2022. You might have been limited to an image, and now you can kind of rebuild your message more dynamically. Being able to really understand what it is that you did there, and then being able to track it, I think is going to be really, really important. And I think, the distribution channels are probably the same. You're still going to have video, you're still going to have connected TV, you're still going to have TikTok, but what an individual brand is going to be empowered to do, well, maybe, Ron's reaction to TikTok, but what an individual brand is actually able to do is probably going to be a lot more democratized. So previously it would take a really large organization to be able to have a really strong content footprint in a lot of these channels. And I think that that's going to be a little bit easier for brands to do. And then it comes back to the tracking and making sure that you have the ability to know what's working.
I'm curious, Rick, if you had to be most bullish on AI for like the creative generation for one medium? Which medium is it?
It is probably like the short video content. I think it's
Yeah,
the
okay.
most engaged, and I
Which
think
actually ironically lends itself best to like a TikTok.
yeah. So I won't yeah, but I think that is where I see like the biggest opportunity.
Yeah.
You're not struggling with the issues of continuity and longer form formats. You can make something engaging, you can make something funny, and you can produce a lot of it. So I think like that's going to be the competition that kind of takes away in 2025, where previously it needed to be really organic. I think that era is going to be it'll be very interesting to see what the emergence is for a lot of brands and how they take advantage of it.
Yeah, you kind of brought me to a different dimension. This on the, I guess like the channels. Generally CTV is just super interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, you have like Netflix dipping their toe in, Amazon Prime Video forcing ads on everybody, but also like I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for ads kind of inside content as is being played, which I mean we've talked about this for years. Call it native, call it whatever you want to call it, but like it's just becoming such a powerhouse of a channel that's kind of where you have to be as a marketer.
Yeah, things that you could dream about in the past of being able to swap out like the Coke for the Pepsi and the TV show from 60 years ago. Like that's entirely possible to do now. You see I saw a ridiculous one with like the Jurassic Park done with like realistic, raptors or whatever. And it was just like these gigantic birds, but like it's the exact same movie, but like, completely redone by some person in their home. It didn't take a visual effects studio or anything like that to redo it. So I think that type of content is going to be, it's going to be really interesting to see how that develops.
Ricardo had a question, so we'll pause and take that. As businesses return focus to growth in 2025, which is a good call out, and they are increasing their marketing spend, what are some of the most common measurement mistakes that you see firms make as they're scaling that these companies should avoid? Rick, I'll pass this one to you.
I think it does come down to understanding what your goal is when you're launching or increasing spend or kind of making a major adjustment to how you approach your marketing. I think sometimes folks kind of like dip their toe in the water and they say like, oh, okay, we're going to start spending on all of these channels again. But really, I think one of the really impactful ways to approach measurement is to make sure that you kind of start a channel and you understand one, what your goal is for when you launch it. Like, is it going to be driving more signups? Is it going to be driving more conversions? Make sure that you're tracking that really well. And try not to do too many things at once. So if you believe that you have your best channel, like start investing in that. Start investing to the point where it's, probably comparable to your next best channel, and make sure that you have a staged approach to really scaling back up in 2025, because you're more likely to learn a lot more about your marketing if you take that type of approach to being able to scale up. You're going to have better signal to noise. You're going to know what your isolated ROIs are for the channel. And you're going to be able to dig in and really understand, okay, what's working, what's not working, and be willing to, take a channel back offline if it doesn't feel like it's performing like you expect. If you're running all of them at once and you kind of say, hey, it's January 15th, we're scaling up and we're going to run Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and we're going to go all out with all of them. It might be too much to really understand which one is actually driving the most performance. So I would say kind of just stage things out, put together a good calendar, and really be able to prove out the results that you want to see.
I was gonna. Oh, sorry, Ron. I was gonna add to that.
What's your take, Ashley? What do you think?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that we've talked about, especially around the data foundation and like some of the other, we've had a lot of conversations around this recently. But like the biggest mistake that we see brands making is that they don't have a measurement plan in place when they go out, like when they set out to test a new channel. And so having that plan in place is probably like the biggest thing that you can do to set yourself up for success. Because then you're going to have like consistent taxonomy. You're going to have the pieces of data that you need to actually make an informed decision on whether or not something is working for you. But Ron, I want to hear your thoughts.
You just said my thoughts, so I have nothing else to say. I agree. I hate when people start testing. I'll say it from a different side. We have people who come to Rockerbox and they go, "Oh, yeah, I really need measurement." And we ask them why. We go, "Well, I just spent a bunch of money last quarter on this test, a new channel, and I have no idea if it performed." And my response is, "You really should have just called us before you ran that test, so you wouldn't have wasted a bunch of money. It doesn't mean the test would have worked, but at least you would have an answer." So I'm on the same page with you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for the question. Okay, so we will move forward. What will define success for marketers in 2025? And how does unified measurement empower them to make bold decisions, whether scaling proven strategies or pioneering into new uncharted territory, testing new channels, kind of what we were just talking about? Ron, I'll let you go first.
I mean, listen, success is different on a company by company basis. Is it profitability? Is it focusing on growth? Is it focusing on retention? So I really think it's just knowing what your company is actually trying to achieve and achieving it is probably the simple version of what success is. I think what Unified brings is the ability to have both a really strong day-to-day sense of how your marketing is performing and the ability to kind of test those assumptions on through other methodologies and to bring those learnings back. So like every single day as a marketer, when you're starting to do your job, you need to know how things are performing. Am I hitting my numbers or not? But like you're going to see things that occur. You're going to wonder, could I scale this channel? Could I cut this channel? Someone's going to just say like, that feels off. That feels wrong. Facebook can't be performing that well. Like those things are going to happen. Knowing that you have methodologies you can validate those with and based off those results calibrate back to that day-to-day KPI is really our vision for unified measurement. And it takes us to like the learnings that you're getting from these methodologies that are more historical in nature, that test that you ran a month ago, that model that you ran based off data for the past 2 years, that it's not just living in the past but actually can affect your day-to-day. And that's where I think Unify is going to have the biggest unlock for our customers and frankly the industry overall.
Yeah, a process that we pretty consistently went through with customers was establishing baselines for channels. And I think as Ron's talking through kind of the unified approach to this is making sure that we calibrate those baselines back to what the core reporting that you would like to see as a business with all of the other methodologies that are potentially available. So if you're running if you've historically run an incrementality test, getting that baseline scaled. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what marketers are tasked with doing is growing off of their baseline. It's like, I want to perform better than I did in the previous year. And I think success is going to be defined really in a pretty similar way of, hey, we're gonna continue to grow and learn on top of what we've done in the previous years. And I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity to grow and scale into channels for a lot of teams in 2025 that just wasn't there in the past. So I know that we talked about that a bit, but I think Unified is really going to be a really useful tool in that toolbox to be able to scale into stuff that's net new that you haven't done before. So really enabling you to understand, hey, historically, we didn't have a TikTok presence. What was that like? How did our business perform? And then being able to run a test as you enter into that channel and making sure that you're able to scale it up. So I feel like Unified is the thing that helps to empower you to kind of work with your baselines, but then enter into new spaces.
Yeah, I think 25 is just going to be this is slightly different. I think it's going to be an awesome year for brands. I think especially coming off of 23 and 24, I heard this like phrase, somebody said, I think it was 23 was survive, 24 was revive, and 25 is thrive. And it's a bit corny, but I like it. And I think that it's going to play out. So that's my prediction for the year. It's going to be a good year for brands.
I like it. And I think like one piece that you didn't talk about as much, but that I think brands are talking about is like this added layer of efficiency. Like we're coming out of a couple of really rough years, and as brands are spending more, they need to spend more efficiently. And that's where, I mean, ultimately that's where Unified comes in almost the strongest, right? Like we're leveraging every tool at your disposal to make sure that you're making the best decisions possible and growing as efficiently as possible. So we have another question. With so many metrics for teams to focus on to determine success, what metrics should be a focus and how do we make sure the metrics we use align with real success? It's a great question. Ron?
That's like the best question I think anyone can ask. I don't have an answer. That's really good, to be honest with you. I mean, I'll give like some thoughts on it, but like I think it's just so important because lots of companies are, and by the way, I think like at times Rockerbox makes this mistake as well. Like, we potentially know where we want to go, but the steps that get us there we don't understand as well as we should, and it could lead to a world where we're optimizing to KPIs that don't actually get us to the destination we want to get to. And that actually goes back to like everything we're saying. You're testing into a net new channel. You want to make sure you know how to measure it, but measure it for what? So like it all comes back again to like, what are you actually trying to accomplish as a business? I'll take it from like a business perspective versus like necessarily just like what the metric is, but it's what is the actual objective? Is it just growth? Is it profitable growth? Is it increasing your AOVs? Is it increasing subscribers? Is it getting lapsed subscribers back? There are just so many different things that businesses can do to try to propel themselves forward, that just actually knowing what that end goal is, I think can help you figure out what those metrics are. But I guess I would really just start there. And even for Ashley, I would say like she probably gets mad at me sometimes when we're talking, and there's so many things we want to do, right? Like we want to do, host our own events and go to events and like do great content. But like, what's the actual business objective we're trying to do? Unless you as an organization have that answer, you're never even going to know what metrics to start to try to look at. So that's kind of my non-answer answer.
I'll just call out that I think one of the things that we even do during onboarding with customers is make sure that we understand the simple version of the metric that you're trying to get to as well. So I think a lot of folks, like as Ron was saying, like LTV to CAC was a really big metric, I think like 3 years ago, where everyone was like, hey, we're optimizing towards LTV to CAC. We need that as the thing that we're tying conversions back to. But it's a really complicated metric. It requires you to have, historical information about your customers, estimate their LTV, understand the acquisition cost, and then create a ratio between those two things. And at the end of the day, I would say for the majority of brands, tracking that first order revenue and then having an LTV model and having those two things separate is actually the right approach. It's like, marketing, what I'm focused in on as a marketing organization is getting more customers and getting new customers. Let me focus in on that. Let's have, a different model for retention or a different model for LTV. And then, set up a separate metric for, hey, these are returning customers. Let's drive as much returning revenue as possible because your LTV is going to go up if you're driving more returning revenue. So I think a big portion of it is try to simplify the complex metrics down and make sure that you have good, clean metrics that you're able to optimize against.
You're on mute, Ashley. But I think she's talking to Jeremy and wishing him
I
farewell.
I said he said he has to head out, and thanks for coming. But the biggest issue that he has is just figuring out where to push budget when every single ad platform takes credit for everything, especially with view conversions. It feels like a lottery, even with what campaigns get credit. For example, should I push more on TikTok or Snap for purchases? It feels impossible to know the best answer at times. And this ties back to deduplicated attribution. Ron, do you want to chat on that for a second?
No, what do you think, Ashley?
I knew as soon as I said deduplicated attribution and Ron smiled that he was going to pass it back to me. But I think it's one of the biggest reasons that attribution should be at the core of any measurement strategy, right? Because if you're not leveraging a multi-touch attribution platform or provider or someone who's helping you to get to a place of deduplicated attribution, every platform is going to be taking credit for every single conversion. And what you're going to see is that exactly what Jeremy's talking about, where you have all of this conflicting information. So what do you need to do? You need to have better measurement in place. Yes, Jeremy, we will send the video out so that you can start tracking these at the user level so that you understand like, okay, this is one user in one conversion that actually touched multiple channels at one time.
So I fully agree with that, and I somewhat clearly I agree with it. We talk about a lot. I think there are still times though where you were going to ask that question, like, where do I scale? And it could be that you have a deduplicated cross-channel performance. You could have the CPA and ROAS of all these different channels. And what if a couple channels are kind of performing at the same level? Like there are there might be inherent limitations to how much that channel can be scaled. Maybe you've tapped out the audience or your brand, the keyword, whatever that is. But that's also where there are other methodologies. Running scale tests can be an effective way to see, is there incremental dollars for that, incremental revenue for the next dollar being spent. Now, those are not necessarily not so easy to do, in the sense like that needs to be something that your organization builds the muscle. Like, how do I then, pause for a moment, look through my data, determine, are we just relying on it? Is there something we need to, is there a model or something we have to do to validate the data that we're seeing? And then are we going to take that data and then use it to refine our day-to-day data? So what Jeremy's kind of facing is a very common problem. I would say, though, not just relying on what the platforms report themselves is a good starting point. They do provide good signals, so I'm not saying don't look at them, but you can't just rely on what they report out themselves.
Dimitri wanted to add on to that and just said, how do you estimate bundles like TikTok plus Snap? I'm not entirely sure what you're asking there. Do you, Ron or Rick? No.
I think a lot of times when folks are spending on platforms like TikTok and Snap simultaneously, it's potentially difficult to understand signal to noise on that. So you might be spending with lower budget, or you might kind of be thinking about them as having somewhat similar content or somewhat similar distribution, and kind of like the mechanism that you're delivering the content through, or the type of content that you're even producing. So I think that there is like an element of estimating, like, hey, if this does really well on TikTok, is it going to do well on Snap? Or did I deploy that creative to both places? And I don't necessarily know if it's one platform or the other that's driving it. I think, if one channel leverages another, and kind of like the interplay between those two things. I think it's really difficult to understand, that interplay between them. I know that we've spent a long time on the multi-touch side, understanding how does branded search overlap with social channels. You're spending on both of those. You want to make sure that you're deduplicating appropriately. I think Snap and TikTok definitely get into some of the deeper issues there. So I think for us, a big portion of that is trying to get access to that view through data, really understand who the user is, develop a model for overlap between those channels, and being able to really help brands understand that. Because you often see kind of that overlap emerge between kind of these channels that are sharing similar content, or you're looking at, or you're in a similar audience pool when you're targeting on both of those platforms.
And I think that's where we kind of push all the way back to unified measurement, right? Multi-touch attribution is great, but most consumers today are being touched by everything that you're doing, because they exist on all of the platforms that you're advertising on. And so that's why it becomes really important to validate that attribution with some of these other methodologies that we're talking about, to actually to determine, testing is really important, right? Because it proves causality, and you can't do that with MTA or MMM. And so it's all of these, it's why we keep talking about why all of these tools are really important in your tool set. Ricardo had another question. What are current best practices for brands who spend online, like Meta and Google, as well as offline, like podcasts, linear TV, direct mail, when trying to create unified measurement in 2025, and then decide where to spend incremental marketing budget to grow? Ron, I'll pass that to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to start by having a day-to-day source. We call it your marketing hub, that you can go every single day to see performance of your media. The way you do that is with a core attribution-based approach to measurement. That could be last touch, first touch, even weight, multi-touch, doesn't really matter. I mean, I have opinions, but for the sake of this conversation, it's a daily source of performance for your marketing. Something that is daily, that's granular, that's highly responsive to the most recent media dollars that you were spent. That can be across online channels. It can be across offline channels. It can be across clicks and views. You can't do that all on Google Analytics, but if you work with somebody like a Rockerbox or some other attribution providers out there, you can see a path to conversion that goes from a linear TV view to a TikTok view to clicked an email to convert. So you start there. What's going to happen, though, again, is over time you're going to want to kind of validate those KPIs. You're going to know, can you scale? Can you cut? Something feels off, maybe a new channel test. And that's where validating what you're seeing on a day-to-day basis through media mix models, incrementality tests, surveys, even ad hoc analyses that you're doing are a really good source to get extra information that you can then bring back to that day-to-day KPI that you're using to run your business. That again, that kind of hub of your business, the core rhythm of your business starts from that day-to-day data. That's the approach that we recommend and what we've seen most successful with our clients that are across multiple methodologies. I'll call it there, by the way. And again, this is like from the Rockerbox perspective. We have clients who are using other vendors for media mix model or other providers for incrementality testing. They're running incrementality tests through Meta, or they have an in-house analyst running a media mix model using Robin. That's very helpful still. And being able to take that data and bring it into a Rockerbox to calibrate that core day-to-day KPI into a unified KPI can be super, super powerful. So that's the approach that we recommend.
Awesome. And so that brings us to our final panel question. And then everyone, if you have additional questions, still feel free to drop them in the chat. But as Rockerbox looks forward to the future, how will the concept of unified measurement grow to meet the challenges of 2030 and beyond? And what role will Rockerbox play in setting the standard for modern marketing? And it's kind of a trick question because who knows what's going to happen in 5 years? Maybe we should have just said 2026 and beyond. Can we even look through just 1 year? But we're conceptually looking towards the future.
Can I ask a question first? Do we have the singularity by then or not, Rick?
I mean, we might already be there, so who knows?
Okay.
We don't know what OpenAI has. Yeah, I'll start here. And just in my opinion on like what I think that we're addressing with unified measurement and where we've seen the biggest problem for orgs. It really just starts with kind of having a lack of clarity on what data is important for making marketing decisions and really being able to align the best form of measurement for like the decision that you're trying to make with the right analysis. So like that's been a problem that we've continued to tackle over time. We've added MMM, we've added testing, we've tried to do ad hoc analyses to be able to help customers dig into very specific problems that they have for their businesses. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to communicate all of that back out to your team, to your org, to everyone that is a stakeholder in the performance of the business. And unified is really like kind of coming back to that that fundamental of like everyone needs a single place where they're able to turn to for kind of a unified perspective on how marketing is working, what the performance is, and be able to use that for decision making. I think that, yeah, as Ron was mentioning, I think that there's going to be a lot that changes over the next 5 years. There's going to be a lot of different interactions with data. And I think like the big thing for me is thinking as an organization, as marketing orgs, like how do we assemble the best data sets that we can so that we can power the best analyses and deliver the best insight. So Rockerbox kind of looks at it through the lens of data foundation, but we also have unified measurement sitting on top of that. And the data foundation is like, let's build the best, robust, like fundamental data set that we can for being able to make all different types of marketing analyses on top of it. Let's help customers perform those different types of analyses, the ones that exist today. And then let's bring it back together and help simplify after we've done all of these crazy analyses. Something that the entire org can kind of like dig into and say like, hey, okay, we understand that the incrementality test from December of last year was useful at that time, but it's different than it is today. How do we weave that back into a cohesive story to talk about the performance of Meta? And I think that that's going to be like the really important thing is being able to kind of have that foundation, run the analyses, but then bring it back to something that's simple again. And that's been what we've been missing, I think, for the past 2-3 years is like, it's become really complicated. This is like where we started at the beginning, but it's become really complicated to measure across all these channels. And Unified is trying to re-simplify that for orgs to be able to operate.
I think that for me, what's exciting about unified measurement, and especially how we try to like speak about it in the playbook that we put out there, which I obviously recommend everyone take some time to read, is that the components that go into it we try to make it distinct from Rockerbox in the sense of, if you're just starting from remove every vendor in the world, but just trying to think about, like, what do you need to do measurement? You need that data foundation, like Rick was saying, and there's certain core data sets you need in that data foundation. Examples that we always talk about are like sessions and path to conversion and spend, and there are a lot of other ones, but like they're kind of these core fundamental data sets that you need. On top of that, we believe you need something that gives you daily information. Every single day you can log in and you can see how is your marketing performing. On top of that, we believe you need ability to validate that daily data and take the results of those validations to adjust what you're using on a day-to-day basis. And what I think is so cool about Unified is that all parts of that could be done via different technologies, different solutions. You could be a brand and say, you know what, I want to go build my own pipelines to pull in spend data. I'm going to do my own. I'm going to use this vendor for first-party pixel. I'm going to go use Meta's Robin for MMM, and I'm going to go use this vendor for incrementality testing. And you could build this whole thing together. And I actually think it'd be a lot of work, but I think you could have a really effective measurement approach. And I think that's what's kind of powerful about this, is that it's a generalizable concept that applies to many, many brands, that brings all different types of measurement, all the different measurement methodologies together in a way that should give you as a marketer, as a company, the ability to make really effective day-to-day decisions. Selfishly, I think that Rockerbox does an amazing job of bringing it all together in one platform. So like that to me is what's kind of cool about both the idea of Unified and at least how Rockerbox is trying to approach it, to make it as simple as possible for somebody to get access to all those components through one company, through one platform, through one technology. And I think part of that was so effective is that this is our playbook, 2024 playbook. We're talking about 2030 here. We intend very much to have our 2025 playbook, our 26 playbook, our 27 playbook, because things are changing fast. And I don't fully know the answers to what all the changes are that's going to have to happen every year. But like building on top of what we've learned so far is what got us to Unified. So I'm excited to see what we learn in the coming years and how we continue to iterate it. But I do fundamentally think this paradigm, data foundation, daily data, validation, and calibration is really what's going to work for most brands in 25.
Awesome. Dimitri had a question about the challenges of MTA, MMM, and other methodologies. Dimitri, actually, we cover all of that in the Unified playbook that Ron was just talking about. We'll make sure that we send that out as well. But we talk about each of the methodologies have their own limitations. Yeah. And even, we spent a lot of time on multi-touch attribution, but it has limitations as well. And that's why we recommend validating your results. And we talked about causality and MMM takes a lot of data and a lot of time, and it's not something that you can use to make day-to-day decisions in a lot of cases. So I think to go through every methodology and its challenges would probably take longer than we have, but
I do think that point, though, in terms of like certain data sets are based off historical information and certain data sets are out of date. I'm sorry, certain methodologies inherently are of the past. And I think that's fine if you understand that and then figure out how do you leverage that today. So I think that's just like a different perspective of at least a lot how we think about it. And we've seen our customers struggle with this. Like, how do I take a test that I ran 8 months ago and use it today? How do I take the model, the MM model that was refreshed 6 months ago or a quarter ago or even a month ago and use that today? Is a common problem that we hear, despite the fact that they bring a lot of advantages, those measurement methodologies. So yeah, it's kind of take the good with the bad.
Awesome. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I want to thank you both for joining us today and kind of shedding a little bit of light on how you're both thinking about Rockerbox's role in unified measurement as we head into the rest of this year. If you all haven't read the Unified Playbook, like I said, we will do that again in a follow-up email here. But to Ron's point, we tried to stay as unbiased as possible in that. It's not just hey, this is all about Rockerbox. It's definitely a Rockerbox point of view, but we tried to keep it very open to like, these are just the core concepts that we think work best for marketers, given all of our experience with these large brands over the past number of cumulative years. So we will send that out, and we would love any and all feedback that you have on it. Like I think Ron and Rick both said, this is an ongoing conversation, and we're continuing to evolve our position as well. So thank you all for joining us today, and we will see you at the next one.
Thanks, everybody.